We are going to make mistakes. We can't avoid them. They're going to happen. But what are you going to do after that? I remember similar realm, because this is where I met a lot of my language obsessed friends. We were all learning multiple languages in college. I had a friend who, in Japanese class with me, was also relearning and improving Spanish. I think she had dual languages. She was doing Spanish and Japanese at the same time. And I remember trying to say a sentence in Spanish, and I conjugated the Spanish verb in Japanese. I said komimasen, to not eat, or like, not eat. I don't even know where that came from. I had never done that before. She understood what I meant because, again, she had a background in Spanish and in Japanese. But I took the Spanish word comer and I conjugated in the negative past tense in Japanese, so masen. And somehow I put those two things together. It was a little bit embarrassing, but now, again, I look back at it, I tell people that story all the time because I'm like, young Bront'e was hilarious. I don't know where she was pulling these mistakes from. I remember in Japanese class, I was watching a lot of One Piece at the time because watching things as I'm learning is really supportive to me, especially when I turn off the subtitles. So I was watching it in Japanese, and I remember going into class and forgetting how to say family in Japanese. So if you're not learning Japanese, in Japanese, the word for family is kazoku. But in One Piece, they say the word for pirate, which is kaizoku. And I, for the life of me, could not get kazoku right. I kept saying my pirates, instead of my family, watashi no kaizoku instead of watashi no kazoku in class. In front of all of my classmates, in front of my teacher. They're like, "Oh, can you tell us about your family?" "Yeah, watashi no kaizoku, my pirates," every single time. I don't know why that happened, but it did. And I just had to, oh my God, embarrass, laugh, and then fix it. You got to fix it and you got to move on. So I'm telling these stories not just to be like, yeah, I'm human, I make mistakes. I'm saying it because when you recognize and you acknowledge the fact that as language learners, as people who are learning multiple languages, we are going to make mistakes because we make mistakes anyway. When you acknowledge that that is inevitable, you are going to fail. The focus then becomes, when that happens, what do I do? When I make mistakes, how do I recover? Do I retreat for a little bit? Yeah, so it must have been scared. Well, luckily, yeah, I think if they didn't have the context of knowing me, and most of us watched anime, they knew I was going through a whole One Piece binge at the time, because I also went to the Japanese language table. It was like a lunch once a week. So they knew I was watching One Piece. So when I kept saying pirates, they were like, "Oh, it's because of One Piece." I was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. It's just happening." So luckily they understood the context. And like my Japanese one teacher was someone who loved anime as well. So like she understood. And accepting mistakes is so hard. I make mistakes in English, but only get embarrassed. Exactly. Exactly. That's the lens that I usually bring to like my coaching sessions is I remind people that in our native language, we make mistakes all the time. Like, I mean, I haven't been paying close attention to how I've been talking this time, but in the live I did yesterday, I was hyper aware of every time I stumbled on a word or I like struggled to pronounce the thing that this is my native language. And I'm, right now I'm just trying to think of what I'm saying next. We make pauses, We pause. See, there was a mistake. We just keep going. We improvise. Sometimes the examples I think I gave the other day was sometimes there are words that we have read before but we have never said out loud. And so the mistake is when you say it out loud. Things like epitome, I used to read, and many other people used to read it like epitome. I remember growing up, and this is native language mistakes. Me and my sister used to play this game on, it was either PlayStation 1 or 2. And we used to call it Vigilant 8. We were like, I love Vigilant 8. Vigilant 8 is the best game ever. It was cars with guns. I'm not going to say the full word on TikTok because they might ban me. It was cars with weapons, with things. And you'd race around and you'd battle each other, right? We called it Vigilant 8 forever. My mom never corrected us. She's like, "Oh, you're so cute. You have a game called Vigilant 8." We finally showed her the CD of the game that she bought us, that she didn't know what the name was. And she was like, "Vigilante? What do you mean vigilante? For the past like 3 years, we've been calling it Vigilant 8 and nobody corrected us." So even in our native language, we are making mistakes all the time. When we think about slang versus casual conversation versus when you talk with your friends versus when you're in a professional setting, there's all these nuances to how we talk and communicate with each other. And when you think about how you are in your native language and then hopefully translate that experience into the languages that you're learning, it just helps you to be a little kinder to yourself. All caught up on, oh yeah, I'm not caught up. I stopped at like 500 or so in One Piece years ago because at the time I was like, I don't want to watch 100 episodes of just Luffy. I want everyone or nothing. But I will get there. I don't mind spoilers, so all the content that has been coming out with spoilers, I'm like, oh, that's cute, that's fun. I'm gonna read the fan fiction anyway and still get the content. Oh yeah, with Facade, yeah, and see, and this is something. So this isn't like a new thing. I know growing up, as we were learning our native languages, we made mistakes. One of the other examples that I gave a lot was I remember the exact moment this happened too. It was fourth grade. No, it was fifth grade. It was fifth grade. It was in my geography class. And one of the things that I hate is being asked to read out loud in front of people if I am not prepared. I was the person in class, whether it was like academic stuff or even later on in language classes, I would read in advance. I would be like, okay, this person is on this paragraph. And so if I count down based on where the teacher's asking people to switch, I'm going to be paragraph like 10. So let me read it in advance, preview it. Like that was me, because the anxiety of reading out loud gets to me. Now I'm much better, especially 5 years of teaching where that's what I do every day. I got better. But I remember not knowing how to pronounce geography out loud. And when I got to that word, I kind of whispered it because I was saying geography. And I was like, I should know how to say this. I know what it means. Like, if you asked me about geography, I could explain it to you. But I don't know how geography. I didn't hit me. Fifth grade Bront'e didn't understand because I was a reader. I read all the time. I still do. But just because I read all the time doesn't mean I say all these words out loud or I hear them in conversation. So again, I look at all these experiences that I've had in my personal life with English, with my native language, and I go, how did you react when you did this? Maybe I actually did kind of give up for a little bit because I couldn't handle it. That's valid. But later on, I usually pick it back up because I am stubborn. I am so stubborn. So if I give up on anything, at some point I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm coming back to it. And that's usually what I do in my native language. So why not give myself that same grace in the language that I'm learning? So when in Spanish, I've been learning Spanish for years. And one of the words that trips me up, unless I'm like in a sentence or I've been, talking for a while, is problem. I don't know why in isolation, problema just does not feel right when I say it out loud. And so I make mistakes when I'm saying it. I hesitate and I redo it 3 or 4 times. But I just go, I'm learning multiple languages, move on. And if someone else, usually I don't have this experience, but if it just so happens that the other person I'm talking to reacts in a way that makes me feel guilty or shameful, I'm like, hey, I'm learning multiple languages. This brain is carrying a lot of translated stuff in here. I have 9 languages in this brain. So if I forget your name, if I forget how to say a word, if my pronunciation, especially with French, if my pronunciation is a little all over the place because I haven't mastered it or I forgot, I'm going to give myself grace because there are 9 languages plus all the other crap that I keep, memorizing, all the other hobbies that I have. There's a lot going on in here. So give yourself that grace of saying, there's a lot of information in here, whether it's just one other language, 2 languages, the job that you have to maintain and understand, the life, family members. Because again, I'm horrible with names. If I haven't seen you for 6 months, I don't remember your name. I know you. I know your face. I know what we've done and talked about. But sorry, names are the first thing to go from my brain. Give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. Oh, that's you with oregano? Yeah. And there's some that I definitely avoid. I'm like, and I'll just talk around it, which is another great skill. Talking around the word that you're trying to say in a language. No problem. No problem at all over on YouTube. I will see you around. But yeah, like there are some words that we just struggle to say. And I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me. Oh, 9. Yes, 9. So Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, Chinese, Russian, American Sign Language, Black American Sign Language, Tutnese is where I'm at. They're all at different levels, so they're not all what I would consider fluent, meaning conversational fluency, being able to write them fluidly, but most of them are at a level where I can use them in the ways that I want to use them. So I'm content. Like I can have conversations in Japanese and Korean. Japanese, hold on. I can have conversations in Japanese and Spanish. Spanish is a little bit less. Japanese is a little bit stronger because I had actively used it in my day-to-day for years when I was taking classes. Like we ended up immersing ourselves for almost like 12 hours every single day just because that's what we wanted to do. Korean and French are the next level. And, but the ways that I want to use the language, which most of them is reading or being able to watch videos without subtitles, talking with some of my friends, like I can do those things. There's a little hesitancy. There's some words that I still don't know, but if I can do that, I'm fine. That's why I start with clarity. So I know what I'm doing these things for. And then I have some languages that I'm planning to learn next: Italian, German, Portuguese, I think Creole. One of my friends has gotten me interested in thinking about Hawaiian. It just brought up a problema to a Spanish speak. See, it happened again. Oh, how is it a masculine word? I don't even think about it anymore. I just go, let me just remember the context of how it's used. In school, I think they taught it that way, where it's like, this is masculine and this is feminine and L. And now, with the experience that I have, I'm like, I would never learn a language that way. I would always look at the words in context and just give me a phrase, give me a sentence, and let me memorize how that's being used so I can know. Because that isolation stuff was too much memorization that was wasted time and effort for me. For some people, it does work. And you just keep doing that. But yeah, there's a lot of words like that in many languages. Like, how is it a masculine word, but it ends in A? It's not following the rules. You're not following the rules, words. But yeah. Just started learning Portuguese and do not like it yet. And feels like the words are slurred. It is really different. I like it just because, well, one, I like being able to understand a lot of Portuguese when I see it because of my experience with Spanish. So like I'll read posts in Portuguese. And I'm like, oh yeah, I basically understood what you said. And I also like the, again, this is me not having learned it quite yet. There's like the ow sound, like mau, now. Like I love when it comes out in a sentence or in songs. I have a lot of Portuguese songs. And I'm just like, it sounds cool. That's pretty much why I want to learn it. So I have to really dive into how I expect to use it first before I jump in. But if you're not liking the process, I would do some brainstorming of what would make the process more fun for you or what would make the process more interesting. Because if you're not having fun with the language, it's going to be really difficult to stick with it. Having fun is one of the big components of like staying motivated or sticking with it even when you're not motivated. So if that's not there, like, are you doing it for a job? Are you doing it for travel? Like something else has to be there involved. But I would try to figure out how to gamify it or how to make it a little bit more fun. Because maybe it's like the resource you're using is boring and you want to choose a different resource. Maybe it's the strategy that's boring. And these are like the kinds of conversations that I would have in a coaching call. What are the different things that are preventing you from liking or continuing, sticking with the thing you've set out to do? But yeah, definitely understand that because I've been avoiding Russian for a year off and on because I don't like the process of learning Russian right now. I feel like if I were at a higher level, I would like a little bit more, but I'm not. I'm still in A1, A2 territory. But I also recognize that if I don't put in the work, I am never going to get there. So I just had to figure out a way that worked best for me. And what I was doing was, in the beginning, was I was learning Russian like I learned Spanish and French. I can't learn Russian that way because for me, it is a very different language. So I had to think about what would help, which for me, sentences and phrases. And that's literally why I created a sentence building course fairly recently. I created it for the me who was struggling with Russian and was like, what is going to help me to, finally start writing in Russian and speaking in Russian, even as a beginner? It was like sentences, understanding the structure of them, understanding how to make a sentence, and then actively practicing, because no matter how much information I absorb and I learn and I read, if I am not using it, I'm going to feel like my progress is not happening because I'm not doing the things that I want to do. So I literally created that course. I was like, what do I need right now? Let me make a formula or like give a structure to this process. And then Sentence Building Pro was born. And so that's what, and I even created, so part of that course, I created a Notion template, and I was like, what do I need out of this Notion template? What do I need out of the workbook that I would be using to follow the steps that I just outlined for myself? And then what do I need to be able to make these sentences and keep track of all the things that I'm doing? So it's not something that I created to be like, hey guys, I made a course, check it out. But no, I made it because I was like, this is what I am using right now in my language studies, so that I can fall in love with the Russian language a little bit more than I did before. And it has helped because I now, I'm not struggling with days of the week as much as I was before. Still haven't memorized them. Still, struggle just a little bit. But I'm no longer avoiding my Russian studies. Whereas before, I had spent months saying, yeah, I'm going to study, and never touched it. Now I come into contact with Russian 2-3 times a week, mostly app work, but sometimes there's this website that teaches Russian in French. So I'll use that and take some notes. But before, it was really hard for me to do that. The sentence building work has made it easier and more fun for me. It's turned it kind of into a game. So I hope that helps. I talked about how to restart a language that you have learned before. We do that with Language Learning Audit. If you are learning multiple languages and you're trying to balance them, I talked about one of my favorite strategies, which is laddering languages. And then we dove into a bit like an improv conversation about schedule creation, because that's one of the things that people love when I talk about the 4 different types of schedules. And I think what's already up, if it's of interest to you, I talked about finding and staying motivated as a language learner and building your confidence. That was another live we did a few weeks back that is now almost all uploaded. So yeah, my goal is to have these lives, have these conversations live with people, be able to connect and get your questions in the moment. And then I'm just going to upload them again to YouTube later. So if you missed it, don't worry. It will be available. And if you're on my newsletter, you're going to get these conversations anyway, because I just talk about these things all the time on a weekly basis. If you are learning languages, I'm a language coach. This is literally what I do. I help people learn multiple languages, start using the languages, get consistent, create routines. That's my whole thing. So check out any of my resources. I have some free resources. I have some paid resources. If you're on TikTok, you can just go to my link in bio. If you are on YouTube, there should be some links on my main profile or in the description below the video. I have my free quiz that tells you what your language learning archetype is. I have my guide for polyglot study routine. I have so many things, and I'm constantly creating things because I have ideas all the time. So check those out. Follow me everywhere so you can know when things are happening. And thank you, whether you have joined just now, whether you've been hanging out with me since the beginning. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you again next time. I will get myself on a schedule and I will share it at some point with people so that you know exactly when to expect me. Until then, if you're following me, you'll see when my live pops up. And if you are able to hang out or even just say hi, I appreciate it so much, even if you can't stay.